Please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
No prizes for guessing. The big international story this evening, from little rocket man in September to very smart and talented in June. A lot has changed the last 10 months, but really, has anything been achieved? Because many international observers are saying this joint statement that was signed and sent out to the media after Kim Jong-un met Donald Trump is really nothing. And it lacks specifics. But for the first time, a sitting US president shook hands with the leader of North Korea and sat down face-to-face for talks. Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un met at Singapore's Capella Hotel and signed a joint statement. Let's take a look at the broad highlights. In a move that has taken South Korea and the US military by surprise, Donald Trump has agreed to suspend military exercises with South Korea in return for a commitment to denuclearization. Trump conceding that the war games were provocative, inappropriate and very expensive, while the US president claims that Kim Jong-un has given his unwavering commitment to dismantle North Korea's nuclear arsenal. He has given very few details on whether there is a particular time frame to this and what does complete denuclearization really mean. According to Trump, international observers will be deployed to verify the entire process and sanctions will be lifted once the nukes are no longer a factor. Trump claimed that North Korea's human rights record was also discussed during the talks. The two countries have agreed to recover the remains of prisoners of war from the conflict between North Korea and South Korea, which goes back to 1950, and the immediate repatriation of those already identified. But at the end of the Singapore summit, we're asking if this is actually a breakthrough or just a glorious photo op. Has anything been achieved at all? Joining us right now is Mr. Vishnu Prakash, our former envoy to Canada and South Korea, somebody who's also been the spokesperson of the Ministry of External Affairs in the past. We've got Stephen Herman joining us. Stephen Herman is the Washington White House bureau chief for the Voice of America, and also political and economic affairs commentator Inar Tangent is joining us all the way from Beijing. But Stephen, coming to you first, there are many people who are extremely critical, former US ambassadors saying that we've really walked away with lesser than what we had in the past. Coming down to the specifics of it, what does this joint statement really mean? Does this mean complete denuclearization, elimination of nuclear weapon, nuclear arsenal that was available with North Korea, or does it only mean no further development of North Korea's nuclear program?
Well, I think what is critical in the language of what was signed today is that North Korea is reaffirming a commitment to the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. So if you look at affirming versus reaffirming, this is North Korea stating something it has already stated in the past. And the definition of denuclearization between those in the United States and those in North Korea, especially in the North Korean government and military, is vastly different. What denuclearization means to those in North Korea is a reduction and elimination of the threat from U.S. nuclear weapons. The U.S. has a nuclear umbrella over the Korean peninsula. That involves Navy submarines. It involves Air Force fighter jets and bombers that are capable of carrying nuclear weapons. North Korea wants to see that force eliminated and no longer be a threat to it. But President Trump is adamant that at this point, there is going to be no reduction of U.S. forces on the Korean peninsula. He said that might be something that occurs in the future. So I think we have a big difference in how each side is defining denuclearization.
All right, so that's an important point. But going to you, Ambassador Prakash, here we have Stephen Herman saying that both sides look at the term denuclearization very, very differently. Now, let's look at what some of the experts have said. Bruce Klinger of the Heritage Foundation, he's gone on to say that each of the four main points was in previous documents, with some in a stronger and more encompassing way in the past. Also, all of this has been talked about in the six-party talks that have taken place in the past between 2003 and 2007, and those statements were actually much stronger.
Very much so. But first of all, I must say that Steve, my good friend, is an astute observer of the region, and what he says has a lot of substance. You know, there are 2 or 3 points that I would like to make. One, it is a fact, and according to US assessments also from different quarters, North Korea is not about to agree to CVID, complete, verifiable, and irreversible nuclear disarmament. For them, their WMD assets are a guarantee to regime survival, an insurance for regime safety. They have staked everything in development of their nuclear deterrent, and they are not going to give it away. They have learned their lessons well. They know how different US administrations can look at a situation, and they are not going to take any chance on that. So, but also the fact remains that the Trump administration has recognized that, and there has been a big shift in the position of the Trump administration in the last 2 weeks in particular. It was earlier they were demanding upfront CVID, calling it a one-shot deal, no longer so. President Trump himself has said that it's a process. It's a process that would take many, many, many meetings, etc., etc. So there is an upfront realization that twisting North Korean arm will not work. That is point one. Secondly, the big difference between the previous situations of 1994 and 2003 and 2018 is that today North Korea is a de facto nuclear power. Earlier they were not. So today they feel secure, they feel less vulnerable. They are not going to use it, they are not suicidal. They know that if they try to use it, they'll be wiped out. But it is a deterrent enough for them to switch gears and say, all right, now we want to be on good behavior, we want to switch gears to economic development, and we want to be a normal country. And I think that very consciously the agreement that has been, arrangement, not agreement, but arrangement that has been concluded today, very consciously provides for that. Instead of getting into specifics, instead of getting into timelines, which are difficult to adhere to, it is a framework of expectations from both sides. And it's a realistic framework. I would say that President Trump has been very bold in recognizing ground realities, and they are moving along in the right direction.
Inar, right. So, Ambassador Prakash, I'm going to take that to Inar Tangent. Inar, Ambassador Prakash feels that this was a bold step on the part of the White House administration, the part of Donald Trump, and you can't really arm twist Kim Jong-un. But how did you see the joint statement? Were you surprised? Were you disappointed? Especially with the kind of rhetoric that had been coming from the White House, that there will be complete denuclearization. The statements were very, very strong against the North Korean administration. Were you disappointed when you didn't see any particular time frame, any particular specifics, how that verification is going to take place? How are we going to make sure that there is no further tension in the Korean peninsula?
All of the above. I mean, what this was a very expensive photo op. I think Trump is looking at his base and the fact that he has a midterm election coming up and he's trying to salvage something. He went from a disastrous G7, and I think the overwhelming judgment on this is that he came back with a very weak, if not defeated. Think to yourself, is there anything less they could have put in to that document? I mean, it was really scraping the bottom. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, they talk about renewing ties, but they don't talk about having a peace process. I mean, having a peace agreement. I mean, generally, you do the peace agreement and then you start sending people back and forth and normalizing relations. I don't know how you would do the latter without the prior. So there's nothing about doing anything about the sanctions itself. The biggest surprise for everybody was Donald Trump's unilateral statement that he was going to end the joint exercises. The other thing that I think that people should be paying attention to is that Donald Trump is doing diplomacy on the cheap. He said that the U.S. will not pay for anything. Japan and Korea will pay for anything that involves the rebuilding of North Korea. He complained about the cost of the drills between the U.S. and South Korea. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, we're facing a possible nuclear catastrophe, and he's talking about sums of money which are infinitesimal. if you start adding up. So I don't think there's much for him to go home with and crow about, but I guarantee you he will be tweeting that it was a massive victory, as he's already indicated.
You know, absolutely. And Stephen, before I come to you about the optics of it all, because we also saw President Trump calling Kim Jong-un a talented man, a smart negotiator, something which I feel was not liked by the press corps over there in Singapore. But Ambassador Prakash, just look at the optics of it all. Trump was at G7 in Quebec just a few days back. The way he lashed out at Emmanuel Macron and Justin Trudeau over tariffs, and look at the way he's speaking about the North Korean leader, somebody who has a dubious record when it comes to human rights violations. Has that gone down really well? And what does this say about Donald Trump? And where are we really heading as far as US foreign policy is concerned?
Very, very good point. As far as President Trump is concerned, the world began with his presidency. I mean, before him, in his worldview, everything that was done was wrong. So whatever Obama did, the Iran deal was bad. The TPP was bad. The climate change was bad. NAFTA was bad. So that he's out to tear it down, prune it down, change it. But the North Korea-US arrangement has Obama's imprint on it. It has his quote-unquote beautiful signature on it. And it is his baby. And therefore, he's going to protect that baby, because this is the only foreign policy success that he has had. And he has staked everything on that. For him, failure was just not an option. Have you ever seen the American president reaching the host country 36 hours in advance of the meeting? I mean, I have not seen that in my long career in modern days. So as it is very, very clear that President Trump wanted a success story. I mean, yes, the optics depends. You are looking at depends on whose perspective you are looking at. From my perspective, and I would reiterate, it's a realistic arrangement. Other arrangements have been tried where countries try to browbeat North Korea, imposed various conditionalities on them, and nothing worked. So here is an arrangement which is likely to work. I mean, it is a different arrangement.
All right.
Here, US has decided to treat North Korea with respect as an equal. And I would also like to close by saying that there is Japan and South Korea and Japan in particular have no difficulty whatsoever in extending the economic development and economic assistance to North Korea, because that will bring down temperatures.
Right.
And they'll be very, very happy
and
to
perhaps the contribution of these countries.
They want peace and détente.
Yeah. So, Stephen, absolutely. And Stephen has been waiting by. Stephen, thank you for waiting patiently. Was the press corps over there in Singapore disappointed when you heard President Trump saying that Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, is a talented man, he's a good negotiator, he's a smart man? Is that going to be a headline in the papers tomorrow?
Well, not necessarily, because for those of us in the White House press corps, we're used to hearing President Trump use superlatives about other people, whether they're positive or negative, on a daily basis. As was pointed out, the really big headline here was this sort of unprompted announcement that the war games would be stopped, maybe not necessarily because they're deemed provocative by Pyongyang, which they definitely are, but because President Trump thinks that the fuel for the jets coming from the island of Guam and flying over the Korean peninsula is too expensive. So that was really, I thought, was the most remarkable thing that was said today.
All right. I'm going to go across to Inar. I believe Inar is smiling, listening to your comments there, Steve. Inar, what do you think will be now required to make sure that this meeting is fruitful and remains fruitful in the days to come? Tensions in the Korean Peninsula remain at a bare minimum. What do we need to do to make sure that this agreement, whatever consensus was reached today, works in the days to come?
Well, I don't know that there's anything that we can do. The question becomes down to these definitions that we talked to, and you alluded to early in your beginning. what is the definition of denuclearization? How long is this going to take? What does North Korea expect in return in terms of help with its economy? These are the big questions that have been unanswered. And until those are answered, there's really nothing that can be done. I think Moon Jae-in should deserve a lot of credit here for pushing this process. And remember, they are now exchanging letters and words as opposed to bullets and bombs. So that is a victory. But I would agree with my colleagues that this is an empty, right now empty house. There's nothing that we can really say about it. And the future is very, very unclear.
All right. And before we go, Ambassador Prakash, one quick question. We just have about 15 seconds. What does this have for India? We have been expressing our proliferation concerns to North Korea. We have been raising North Korea's proliferation links with Pakistan. What do we get out of all of this?
Two things, one positive and one negation of the negative. Positive is that our trade relations with North Korea will be back, and we were the second or third largest trading partner of North Korea. I think that will continue. The negation of the negative is that the illicit cooperation between North Korea and Pakistan in particular, which was a direct security threat to us, will hopefully had ceased, but will hopefully be put to rest finally when North Korea normalizes and is no longer prompted to earn foreign exchange through dubious means.
All right. Ambassador Prakash, thank you very much for joining us. And we'd also like to thank Stephen Herman, who's joining us all the way from Singapore, and also Inar Tanjun for joining us from Beijing. So all eyes on what's going to happen in the next couple of months. We've had a very crucial, a historic meeting today, but all international observers saying that this is a meeting which lacked specifics, and a lot will have to be done. A lot of follow-up action will also have to be done. Thank you very much for joining us.